third largest data center company, NTT Limited, operates in 73 countries and regions, has over 31 companies across its entire group, and delivers services in over 200 countries across the globe. At the top of it all is Jason Goodall, Global CEO of NTT Limited, who is here to give us insight on what the company has in store. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thanks, Abby. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Can you give me a brief breakdown on what the company is doing at the moment and how it is gathered in all the different compartments?
Yeah, sure. So, an exciting time for us as a business. In July of last year, NTT Holdings announced that we're bringing together and forming a new company called NTT Limited. As you mentioned in your opening, it was the bringing together of 31 different companies from around the world to create an ICT or IT services powerhouse. We're about $11 billion in revenue, about 50,000 people around the world. As you mentioned, we operate in 70 countries and regions around the world, so really, really exciting. And as a business, the reason why we decided to bring all these capabilities together was in response to what the market opportunity is. And if you look at how the market is evolving and how quickly the market is transforming, around a couple of, I think, key components. First and foremost is this whole kind of concept of a digital transformation. Companies are more and more trying to understand how do they get better access and better use of the data that exists, whether it's in their customer base or within their own businesses. And fundamentally what they're trying to achieve is one of four things. How do they actually improve their own revenue to their own customer base, number one? How do they potentially lower their cost of delivering services to that customer base? How do they improve the experience of their own customers? Or lastly, how do they improve their employee experience? And the way they want to try and do that is to try and gather as much information or data as they possibly can to analyze it in a way that really creates this value. And as an organization, if you look at the capabilities that NTT Limited has, all the way from consulting at the high end, down through system integration, managed services, and all of the infrastructure assets that we have. As you mentioned, you're opening one, we're the third largest data center business in the world. We also have a global network across 190 countries around the world. We own our own submarine cables. So we really are quite unique in that we're able to offer that kind of end-to-end service capability right the way from the infrastructure all the way to the consulting layer, across infrastructure and applications in 70 different countries around the world in order to really help our customers ultimately digitize and transform their organization. So really this whole coming together of these 31 companies was in response to that market opportunity.
And can you give a brief overview of this powerhouse that you've created? What are some of the key players that you've joined together?
So a number of things. So if we start sort of at the infrastructure layer, let's start with the data center component of it. Over the last sort of 10 to 15 years, NTT had been acquiring different data center companies around the world. So what we've just announced now, very recently, as you know, Abby, is we've consolidated those data center businesses, which is really bringing together Gyron, which is a UK-based data center business, eShelter, one of the biggest European data center businesses, RagingWire, the massive footprint in the US, as well as our assets in Asia. We brought all of these together to create a data center company that now has over 160 data centers in 20 different countries around the world, and is probably the largest data center company outside of the US, and probably third kind of globally. In addition to that, we kind of brought together the capabilities of our managed services business. So within NTT Communications, they had a managed services capability, very, very strong around managing across hyperscalers. We did an acquisition in the US, a company called Secure24, which is one of the leading and a Gartner top right quadrant managed services business that looks after the application layer. And then within Dimension Data, we had a very strong platform delivered managed services capability across the infrastructure. So if you now take the combination of those three managed services business, you've got the application layer that is now managed, you've got the infrastructure and the hyperscalers that are managed, and you've got the infrastructure that has managed to come together and really bring an amazing capability to deliver platform-delivered managed services to our broad client base. So those are the type of capabilities that we've been able to bring together by combining these 31 companies, really in response to what the market's looking for.
And let's take a trip down memory lane. What has been NTT's growth strategy from the beginning? How has this company gotten to where it is today?
So it's been an amazing growth strategy over the last sort of 10 years or more. As I said, now we're about an $11 billion organization from fairly humble beginnings about 10 years ago. And I think that growth has been largely driven by our focus around client experience. So the company has always had the clients at the center of everything that we've done. And I think it's in response to those clients' requirements by really bringing together capabilities that are going to make a massive difference to their own success and the business value that they're looking for, that has allowed us to continue on this growth projection. Going forward, if you look at where the market is moving and why we believe that we're going to continue to grow in the same way that we have in the past, is really, once again, bringing together, if you look at what companies are trying to achieve as they digitize and transform their organizations, they really are looking at companies that can actually help them on that managed services journey. We have a unique capability around delivering those managed services. So if you look at the growth projection, Abby, I mean, we've been on a fantastic growth projection over the last 10 years, as I mentioned, to about an $11 billion company. We believe there's still a massive opportunity for us as an organization, which is driven by the market opportunity as our clients globally try to digitize. We have the assets now that are able to really provide that end-to-end capability from managed services all the way down into the infrastructure. Some of the key growth areas, if you look at what IDC, Gartner, and some of the analysts are talking around, is this massive growth in the opportunity of managed services. So double-digit growth in managed services. There's this massive sort of proliferation of data as IoT, the Internet of Things, becomes more and more prevalent. As the world moves from an analog world to a digital world, if you think about everything that we use day to day, whether it's in your motor car, whether it's in your home, whether it's in your office, even wearables from a health perspective, everything has been digitized. All of those digital and IoT-based assets are creating data. All that data needs to be mined and understood. So from our perspective, with the capabilities we have around, first of all, helping clients collect that data through our platforms. Secondly, having the engines to actually be able to analyze that data and create value out of that data, we believe that's going to allow us to continue to grow as we move forward in the market.
And talking about growth, what is your strategy? What is NTT's strategy for the next decade?
I think our strategy is to continue on this journey around being that one-stop company that our clients can go to around a full, broad capability around ICT services, number one. Number two, as an organization, we've always made incredible investments around innovation and R&D. So we're one of the few companies, as a group, NTT spends about $3.6 billion around R&D investments. As NTT Limited, we've created our own research capability and our research center on the west coast of the US. In support of that, we also have our client experience centers and client innovation centers. We've opened two so far, one in Australia in Sydney, another one in Belgium, in Brussels in Belgium. And we're going to continue to invest as an organization around innovation to make sure that we're ahead of that technology curve. A large part of what we do culturally and with our clients is co-innovation. So we actually work very, very closely with our clients in innovating around future technologies that allow them to disrupt the industries that they operate in. And I think it's this mindset of having a broad set of assets, number one. Number two, we have a services delivery mindset. Number three, we continue to invest a substantial amount of money in R&D and innovation, but also with a work ethic of how do we actually bring that innovation together with our clients. And lastly, we're able to do all of that on a global scale. So hopefully, everything being equal, maybe that will allow us to continue to be relevant to our clients and continue to grow as an organization. And I think that sort of strategy will certainly take us to the next 5 years. Frankly, as a CEO and anyone in the technology space, to go from 5 years to 10 years, I think the world is going to continue to change. So it's difficult to kind of have a 10-year strategy. I think a 5-year strategy is probably as far out as you can look now. What is important is that the culture of the company will allow you, as you go forward, to reassess what the next 5 years after that looks like.
What kind of things are you offering your clients that they probably wouldn't get anywhere else?
So I think the first thing around sort of clients and client centricity is a culture and a mindset. And we've always had at NTT this mindset of the clients at the center of everything that we do. And I guess that always starts with listening to the client first. So I'm pretty confident that all 50,000 people within NTT really are focused and understand that our value ultimately is only measured by our client success and our client's experience. So that's inculcated in everything that we do as an organization. in support of that, a lot of our remuneration and our KPIs and the way that we actually manage our people is very much focused around that client experience. So the whole organization, from a cultural perspective and from a people management perspective, is very much targeted around making sure that everything that we do is focused around the client. From a capabilities point of view, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we really are confident that we have a broad set of capabilities that allow our clients to trust us, that we can deliver on what we promise, number one, but also number two is that we can start the engagement from a consulting perspective. So really sitting down with our clients and fully understanding what are they trying to achieve as an organization, which is fairly complex in today's world with the options that you have. How do you really drive business success and use technology to transform the way that they're running their own businesses? So we can start the conversation there, but we can then go all the way through the whole life cycle of services and ultimately deliver on that promise. So it's not just about finding out what they want to do and allowing them to do it. We can actually then deliver that full capability, deliver the solution, do the procurement of the technology, and then most importantly manage that on an ongoing basis. So we believe that's fairly unique.
And talking about the sector as a whole, what are some of the trends that you've witnessed in your tenure as?
So I think there's three, if I was to try and summarize it, and there's a lot going on in the world. I think there's probably three sort of key areas that I'd like to maybe just touch on. And this is not an exhaustive three, there's so much going on in the world. I suppose fundamentally though, you could argue that technology's never played a more important role in the world than it is today. The technology really is fundamentally transforming the way every company operates around the world. It's bringing new companies to bear that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. In effect, it's actually changing the way we as individuals live in the world. So technology has never had a more important role to play, and I think a large part of that technology play really is around a couple of things. So first and foremost, it is around data. If you look at the power of data, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at things like IoT and how we can now digitize everything that we do and how you can take that data and make value out of that data. If you look at some of the trends and how quickly the advancements are being made around things like artificial intelligence, around things like machine-to-machine learning, around things like robotics, there's a fundamental shift in the way that technology is now enabling the human race fundamentally to do things in a very different way. So we see as an organization a massive opportunity and a massive responsibility in how do we harness all of that capability for the good of our clients, for the good of our people, and fundamentally for the good of society. Linked to that, I think, is the way that you can now start to deliver some of that value is very different. So if you're looking from an infrastructure and an architecture perspective, there's a massive shift from sort of non-programmable infrastructure to what we call programmable infrastructure. In simple words, from a hardware-defined world to a software-defined world. And as you start to make that transition, your capabilities of a software-defined world are far more agile, they're far more cost-effective, they're far more scalable. So that allows you as an organization to move much quicker into the digital world than you were ever able to do before. Cloud computing, everyone knows around cloud computing. Every time you speak to anyone around technologies around cloud, our view of the world is that the future will be some sort of hybrid cloud environment where most of our clients will have a combination of their own architecture and their own infrastructure with applications. They'll use hyperscalers, and they're going to continue to use software as a service providers, people like Workday and people like ServiceNow, Salesforce.com. In order to enable that, you need a network that allows you to move applications and data across that hybrid architecture. And once again, us as a company, we've been seeped in from a DNA perspective in the world of networking. For many years, we have great skills around software-defined networking, which allows us to happen in a much more agile way. And once you have your architecture played and your applications and your data across this hybrid world, we are one of the few companies that can actually then manage that on an ongoing basis for you. So those, I think, key trends around the value of data, this whole digital transformation, Internet of Things, the new technologies around artificial intelligence, robotics, and these new things around artificial intelligence, robotics, and machine-to-machine learning with a combined way of looking at your architecture in a very, very different way as things move to software defined. I think those key trends in the market are what are really driving this transformation.
What do you predict for it in terms of growth, in terms of financial stability and sustainability? I know climate change is a big topic for everyone.
Starting with the first one, I mean, we continue to see opportunity in data centers. So we announced a little while ago we're going to continue to invest in growing our data center footprint. As I mentioned, we've now consolidated all of our data centers into one single unified operating company. We've announced that we're going to invest over $7 billion as we go forward in extending that data center capability. So we see a world where data centers will be a very important piece of the infrastructure that allows the world to progress around things like cloud computing and this whole proliferation of data, number one. We see a massive opportunity, as you correctly mentioned, to try and understand how can we now run data centers in a way which are much more carbon friendly, much more sort of green in the way that they're done. And I think that's a very, very important aspect, as we move forward. And as an organization, we continue to invest and explore different technologies that allow us to run these data centers in as green, effective, carbon-friendly way as we possibly can. I still think frankly, there's probably a lot of work we need to do as an industry to obviously continue on that journey. We also think that there's a massive opportunity not only in building data centers, but in making sure that the assets that you have in those data centers create the maximum value. So we always try and get a combination of having our enterprise clients very, very closely positioned to some of the hyperscalers, so you can get the benefit from an architecture perspective between your own infrastructure and hyperscaler infrastructure, number one. And number two is becoming more and more around the management of those data centers. So if you bring all of those things together, and if you look at how the world continues to transform and the amount of data that's being created through things like Internet of Things, we believe there's a very, very healthy future in the data center world.
And lastly, what's the one thing you're looking forward to in terms of NTT?
The journey for me is always around the people. So we brought together these 31 companies July of last year. So we sort of 6-7 months into the journey, so very, very new. I'm just so excited around seeing all of these kind of people from different parts of the organization coming together, working together, collaborating. And I suppose that the best thing where we're so fortunate as people working in technology, frankly, but also at NTT, is that you have a massive opportunity to make a real impact on the world. And I suppose from my own personal perspective, I see it as a huge privilege to be able to use technology that really can benefit our customers, obviously, as well as our people, vitally, but maybe even more important, that can really make an impact on the broader society and the broader world that we live in. So I think it's quite unique and quite exciting when you find yourself in a position where you can have that kind of influence and impact.
Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Good. Thank you, Abby.
Don't forget you can follow Data Economy on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter, and visit our website on www.data-economy.com.